Hello, we're Mike and Cindy Jacobs. This is the third in a series where we're talking to Marc Nuttle, author of Moment of Truth. Mike and Cindy Jacobs, Generals International. Marc, we're so glad you've joined us in the studio. We gave you kind of a clarion call. Will you come just share with us kind of where we are? We've done a piece on American exceptionalism, kind of the posting the seriousness, and this actually kind of where we are, sort of a state of the union as far as how we're looking or not approaching this situation, economic crisis. Will you tell us about that, please?
Okay, and let's set one more foundation. You told me this, and I believe this to be the case. One of the things is this is not business as usual.
Right.
If you don't get anything else out of this presentation, that the viewing audience is to understand that we cannot continue to borrow and print forever. This is not business as usual. What I call the policy that's being implemented now in Washington, D.C. is the 3D vision policy. Is this policy of deficits leading to a debt that we can't support, and then the denial to believe that this is no different than the past. Mm-hmm. So deficits, debt, and denial. And what does that lead to? It leads to a fourth-dimensional wall that is so big, a debt wall, so big that you can't climb over, you can't walk around, and it falls on you. Mm. Now, what are the signs of this? We predicted last year before the elections that the first cracks would be in the states. The states are being burdened with unfunded mandates, particularly a health care plan that they can't afford. Mm-hmm. States can't print the money. Mm-hmm. No. And most states have a balanced budget amendment or balanced budget constitutional provision that they can't borrow beyond a certain amount.
So they won't be able to kick in the amount of money needed to fund some of these governmental programs.
They can't get the money.
Yeah, and, they don't have it.
And so the government won't have it to give to them either.
Well,
unless they print it.
Unless they print it. And that's what's going on in Wisconsin as we speak. Mm-hmm. The reality of the finances is hit them right in the face like cold water. Mm-hmm. We cannot continue on with this structure. We're talking about structural deficits. They're deficits that go on systematically year to year no matter what you do. It's not a matter of an up economy or a down economy. They're structural deficits. And that's what the states are faced with. So let's talk about that in a minute. 46 states now are in the red. And most at least a level of 10%. Now, you've seen this one crack now in Wisconsin, what's happened there, and the trauma they're going through politically. There's another 45 states that have to do this also in March, April, and May. Budgets are presented, had to be negotiated, presented to the chief executive, the man or woman in charge of the state, the governor, by May and signed into law. And that's what's going to happen in the next 60 to 75, 80 days. The next big moment in state financial crisis is around the 1st of July, when what happens with unemployment and those that move from unemployment to welfare. The cost of welfare is a federal program, but the states are mandated to put so many people in charge of so many people who apply. Like in my home state of Oklahoma, it's going to cost about $100 million. It's not in the budget process right now for the state to handle these federal programs. The problems with the federal government and the states and these programs, guys, is that normally what happens is the feds give $2 for every $1 the state contributes. When you try to unwind that, it becomes very difficult because if the state doesn't put the money up, they lose $2 federal dollars, which can put pressure on other programs or on that program, some that are mandated by federal law that they had to provide. And now we're in this crisis of what to do in July. And I predict we'll get through that. But here's where you see a crack that I think will make all these things abundantly clear to the public. The next big mountain is unemployment benefits that expire, they phase out, but basically expire at the end of January 2012.
All these people that lost their jobs and can't get work.
It's about 9% of the public, and many that are depending upon that. They should have been phased out or been given some direction on how to get off of that if they were going to end them. But that vote has to come by December 25th, unless Congress doesn't want to go home for Christmas. And I think you'll start to hear this now, in late October, November. That will be the debate, what to do. And now you're at this crisis point, because if you extend them, given these budget deficits, the president's budget that he submitted to Congress is $1.67 trillion in arrears. That's their number. That's the deficit for the next fiscal year, not the ongoing, not the continuing resolution they're debating right now. In addition to that, then in 2012 will be these unemployment benefits, which are part of that budget, but then had to be extended in 2012, which are not necessarily part of that budget. Now, you can only print the money at that point because we've talked about world liquidity, the world's inability to keep funding these deficits, certainly at these low interest rates. And as that happens, and these decisions are made, we're going to decide within the next 18 months what kind of a country we're going to leave to our children. Because we're either going to have such a debt that we can't sustain it, therefore you have to cut back so dramatically. It's not even proper planning on how to revamp your budget. Or if we print the money, and we're precariously close to the point, it's never happened now in the history of the world, where the country that controls the primary reserve currency of the world is printing money to pay its debts.
Yeah.
And now QE1, quantitative easing 1, and QE2, quantitative easing 2, will have spent $1.2 trillion by June of this year. And nobody knows how much is too much. But somewhere around 10% is probably the mark when you print 10% of the currency in the world's circulation, which some estimates are $34 to $35 trillion in circulation. You start getting around $3 to $4 trillion of just printed capital. This isn't borrowed. This is beyond fiat, not backed by gold or anything. It's just printed money and paying T-bills or paying bills. If you could do that, that's what the kings would have done in the Middle Ages, and they would have survived. So those are the cracks you're going to see. That's what's coming. Those are the debates we're faced with. So now we're into this point of denial. Do our leaders understand it's not business as usual? And it's not just our children's future, guys. There are a lot of people, there are a lot of single women with children out there for whatever reason, and they need leadership. They need programs. It's not fair to them. I argued last year it's not fair to these states. Now, these states need to be restructured, and they need to be managed, they need to be disciplined, but they need to be given some lead time to do it. And people who depend upon these pensions, give them some notice, give them a year's notice, and let's figure this out together. It's going to take some shared sacrifice to get through all this. But those are the signs, those are the cracks, that's what's coming. It's going to happen before the end of 2012, and the decisions we make now through the next presidential cycle are going to dictate what kind of country we give to our children.
Now, we talked about how serious this was. I mean, I remember we talked, I can't remember, it was quite some time ago. You said, Cindy, when we try to tighten our belt, there's going to be rioting. You predicted this. And you said even, and worse, if these states are to the point of bankruptcy, not going to be able to pay some of these, Medicare or Medicaid, if there's no money to pay it, unless the federal government gives it to them somehow. And so if there's no money to pay it, then people will riot because they're not going to be able to eat or not going to be, won't there be some kind of other disruptions that could potentially happen? Well,
first, I believe in the character of the American people. I think if they were told the truth, they'd rally to the cause.
And what would be telling them the truth
They
mean?
don't understand that this debt we're talking about, these deficits that's being debated in Washington, D.C. right now, everybody sees it as a political debate of, okay, we should live within our means because it's the proper thing to do, versus, well, we need to pay for programs for people who can't help themselves. That's well and good, but they're not being told that this debt is getting to the point that it's taking on a life of itself that can't be managed.
It's a perfect storm.
Because of interest rates and cost and structural deficits. If the American public truly understood the threat, they wouldn't be so worried about right now their pension, right now what they're getting paid, as we'd get through this together. And I don't think it's been properly explained to them.
Yeah.
Well, if they continue to just politicize it, which is happening in a lot of the states, it would seem to me that, like the Wisconsin governor has said, my only other choice is to furlough people. I have got to lay off people. That increases unemployment dramatically. And so it looks to me right now, Mark, like they're just playing it was a political football instead of really addressing it.
They're afraid to tackle entitlements like Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare. The numbers are so large, so overbearing, so dominating that no one can see it the forest for the trees. And there is a solution. There is some hope, and here's what we'll talk about later.
Yeah, we're going to come back in our next posting, and we're going to talk about solutions, about, you know, what we say, biting the bullet, what could be done, what has been done historically, even as we look in times of war. We're in a war for the sustainability of a nation, if you want to look at it like that. So we'll come back just a moment in our fourth posting, and we'll talk with Marc Nuttle about potential solutions.